Hey guys, welcome back to my channel, and hello if you're new here, thank you so much for joining. So today we're going to be talking all things popular BookTok books, whether they're worth it, whether they're worth the hype, overhyped, underhyped. I have read pretty much all of the really popular BookTok books, and I do tend to find that most of the time I get slightly underwhelmed. However, there are a couple that are gems that I have found that have become some of my favourite books of all time. And obviously, like, books aren't cheap to buy, and not everyone can have a Kindle and Kindle Unlimited and everything, because the Kindle isn't cheap to buy. So spending the money on books, you want to know that it's going to be worth your time to read it and worth the money. And obviously reading is very subjective, so even if it's something that I might love or might dislike, that doesn't necessarily mean you will feel exactly the same. I think everybody reacts to certain books and stories and tropes and characters differently. We all look for different things in our books and want different things out of our reading experiences. So it's not going to be a one size fits all, but this is just going to be my opinion. So if you feel like you have similar reading taste to me, or you've noticed that you like the same books as me and things, then you might be able to take something away from this as to whether you think these books are worth it. I do think, like, I love that books and BookTok and everything has become such a huge thing over the last couple of years. However, I do think it does also become extremely misleading at times, and I have fallen into that trap quite a few times. In fact, actually, in one of my most recent vlogs, I read a book that everyone is rating 5 stars, and I think I gave it like 2, and I probably should have DNF'd it. So let's talk about all these really popular BookTok books and book series and whether I think they're worth them or not. So the first series is the Hoops trilogy by Kennedy Ryan. So I do believe that these covers are actually out of print now. However, you'll probably be most familiar with Long Shot, which is actually the only book from this series that I've read, and I think will be the only book from this series that I have read. Now, you will see 5-star reviews for this all day long. I personally think that this is actually an overhyped series, and I did not enjoy the first book. I know it's a bit mean to put the other two that I have not read yet into the same category. However, I just feel like if they're anything like the other book, I just don't know if they're going to be for me. So the problem that I had with this, when you read like 100+ books a year, you get a really good feeling for like what is good writing and what isn't good writing. I mean, I've obviously never written a book, so I don't know how difficult it is. You do start to see who can write well and who can't, who can develop a really good story, who can pace a story really well. Like, you will start to see that when you read that many books, like year in, year out. And I just actually felt like, I know that Kennedy Ryan is a really well-loved author, and I haven't read any of her other books. This is actually the only Kennedy Ryan book that I've read. So it's not to say I'm never going to read something of hers again, because I actually thought her writing was beautiful, but the execution of the story in this I did not enjoy. It's a sports romance, and it's basically like a forbidden love scenario. It also has some very traumatic topics and very real topics in it, which I do feel like she handled well. It's just the actual execution of the story itself I didn't like. I thought that it was just so insta-lust and then really insta-love. I didn't buy into the characters' relationship, and if you don't buy into your characters or even like your characters or believe in what they're believing, like, you're not going to enjoy the book. And because of that, I just didn't enjoy this. And I kind of thought to myself, if she writes everything this way, where the characters just fall in love instantly and they don't really develop anything, we don't watch things develop, especially when you pair it with a more serious storyline, then I don't know, because every book that I've heard Kennedy Ryan write seems to be those topics that are very much real life, and if that's the way she writes them, I just don't know. I just didn't love this. Okay, not my camera dying. And then whilst I was waiting for it to charge up a bit, spilling tea on the jumper I was wearing. So if you've noticed it's different, we're gonna pretend it's not. I never thought tea would betray me like that, but it did. In typical chaotic poppy style. Anyway, let's continue. The next series is the Playing for Keeps series by Becca Mack. Obviously this is a hockey romance series. This isn't dark romance or anything. This is literally just sports romance, rom-com style. And it surprises me all the time how much I really enjoy this series. And this is one that I do feel like BookTok definitely got it right. It is really fun. You have to take it with a pinch of salt. Does it get mildly cheesy at times? Yes, it does. But do you laugh along with it? Are the plots actually quite... I wouldn't say the plots themselves are good, but it's more like the interconnected side of it all, with the friendship groups and watching their relationships develop and everything, and seeing all the characters appear across all the books. I haven't actually read the last 2, but I have read the first 2, and I did really enjoy them. I think I gave the first one 3.75 stars, and I gave Play With Me 4 stars. That's been my favourite so far, and The spice is so good in these books, and I just find them to just be enjoyable, like from start to finish. I thought Consider Me was a little bit long, but aside from that, they are actually really good, and I probably wouldn't have picked these up if I wasn't on BookTok myself. Like if I saw these in the shop, I don't think I'd have picked these up. So I'm actually thankful for that recommendation, because these are fun and I use these as palette cleansers when I'm not reading dark romance, which is extremely rare, but on the rare occasion. That's why I haven't finished the series yet. But yeah, it is really good. On the subject of books that I probably would have never picked up if it wasn't for TikTok and BookTok and being in those sort of bookish social spaces, I probably would have never read Magnolia Parks. I do have the whole series, but I decided to not get it off my shelves because they are getting increasingly more messy as time goes on again. This series is a true masterpiece. I wouldn't necessarily call it a romance series. It's more like women's contemporary literary fiction with romance in it. Obviously the romance does drive the plot, but there is also a lot of trauma and darker subjects that are covered, a lot of talk about mental health, and the characters do things to each other in this which are not typical for a romance book. It is very emotional and it makes you cry. You need to send Jessa Hastings your therapy bill when you get to the end of each book, but honestly, this series is a masterpiece. The way that Jessa Hastings writes is like no other author that I have on my shelves. Her writing is beautiful. It's so poetic. It's extremely lyrical. It just blows me away. Like her writing style is so unique, and I don't think I would have picked these up if it wasn't for BookTok, and this is one of the best recommendations I've ever had from it. So if you were holding off on reading the series, I really advise that you read it and pick it up and just give it a go. I do think that you have to make sure you get through at least book 1 and 2 if you're not sure about it, because you need to get used to the writing style. And I think if you can get past that and start to understand the characters, because what I find people do is they read Magnolia Parks and then they're just like, these characters are just complete car crashes and they're so toxic and all the miscommunication and everything. But once you actually really truly understand the depth to these characters, the meanings behind things, the why they are the way they are and things, and what's happened to them in the friendship group, that's when it really becomes such an emotional wild ride, and it's amazing. I do really think I am actually one of those people that hates when people say it gets better. I don't necessarily think it gets better. I think it's amazing from book 1 through to the most recent one, but I think it's more that you need to get used to Jessa's writing style and the way that she portrays her characters and like their thoughts and feelings. So it is one that you need to get used to, but this is one of the best recommendations that I've ever had from the bookish space ever. It's just amazing, and I think about these characters all the time. In terms of fantasy, everybody knows and loves Zodiac Academy. I think Zodiac Academy was massive even when I was on BookTok like 2 years ago, 3 years ago when I first started my account on there. I remember seeing people talk about Zodiac Academy. I wasn't really massive on fantasy. I hadn't even read ACOTAR by that point, but this is amazing. I am only 3 books in and I think it is absolutely incredible. Is it the best written? Is the writing amazing and all that stuff? No, but is the actual plot, how fast paced it is, how exciting it is, how incredible this world is and how intriguing it is and how good the magic system is and all of that, is that absolutely incredible? Yes. Yes, I don't read as much fantasy as I do other romance books and other genres. I would say I'd say my split actually. I recently downloaded Fable and it does actually give me my split where I think I read like mainly, I think it's like 60-something% romance and I think I read like 20% fantasy. So I don't read a lot of fantasy, but this is honestly up there of all the fantasy books I've read. I think this is so good, and I like that it has slightly darker elements to it. It just feels, I wouldn't say it's like dark, I wouldn't say this is dark fantasy, but it definitely has a lot of darker elements in it, and I think this is so good. And if you are sitting on Zodiac Academy, you need to stop sitting and stand up, run to the bookstore, go and get it. It's so good. Okay, so another author who has pretty much a cult-like following on BookTok is Rena Kent. I've read 17 Rena Kent books so far, so I'm about halfway through her like Renaverse that she has. I think there's like 30-something or maybe 40 books in there. She really is that good. I think especially if you like dark romance but you don't like it to be too dark, like say like the Lord series or Haunting and Hunting Adeline, like say if you don't really love it that level but you just like to read those sort of dark elements where it might have like bully romance and things like that, she is so good at that. Like I honestly think all of her books I rated between 3.5 to 5 stars, and I think I've only rated maybe 2 of her books 3.5 stars. Everything else has basically been 4 stars plus. She is so good, and I actually think that the more I get into her universe, the better her writing is, the better her storytelling has become. I do think, like, this is the book I'm holding up here is the first book in the Royal Elite series. This is actually my least favourite book, one of my least favourite books of hers, and then I've got another one in the Thorns Duet, which is the first book in that. I didn't love those books, but that's 2 books out of the 17 that I've read, and for someone who reads a lot of dark romance, I think it really sticks out to me if I read an author that I don't feel like is doing the genre justice and like not doing a very good job with it, because I think dark romance is quite difficult to get right because it can be very quickly seen as romanticizing things, or it can just be like way too unbelievable, really far-fetched, or it's just downright traumatic and you're just like, what the hell am I reading? But I feel like Rena Kent is just perfect if you enjoy that kind of romance, but it's not something you want to read all the time. Like, she really is as good as everybody says she is, and I do believe like the hype that Rena Kent gets is very well deserved. Like, every book I've read of hers, I've really enjoyed it, and I keep wanting to go back, but I'm trying to not. I've got so many books on my TBR that part of me is like, I'm just gonna have a whole entire month where I just read the rest of her books. So I really want to get to the Legacy of God series, which I think is one of her series that are on the darker side, which is why I want to get there. But I have to hold back because I need to make sure that I switch up things, because I'm such a mood reader at the moment that I have noticed if I'm reading too much of the same genre, I get a little bit bored of it. But yeah, Rena Kent is really, really, really good. If you need somewhere to start, then start with the Royal Elite series. It's right at the beginning of it all anyway. I think it's a really good introduction into like what she writes and how she writes, but I'm sure you will love her. On my FYP on TikTok, I would say every other scroll somebody's talking about Rena Kent, and I was like, how can she, is she really that good? But she is actually genuinely really that good. Like, all the books that she has released so far have not disappointed. All of the series, all of the characters, and they're all interconnected as well. So there's second generation books, such a fun world to read. They're so connected, like even cousins and second cousins and like uncles and aunties, like it's that interconnected, all of the books that you get. So I would recommend just starting at Royal Elite and see how you get on. So the Chestnut Spring series by Elsie Silver, not my favourite. I've got 2 books in and I just don't know if I can do it, but I think this is more to do with my book taste as opposed to, well, actually I don't think Flawless is well written, to be honest. Heartless was a hell of a lot better, but I do think Elsie Silver definitely is more for a certain type of reader. I think if you love your small town, cozy, fluffy romance, throw some cowboys in there and stuff like that, you'll really enjoy her, especially if you just want to read, well, everyone reads for escapism, but I mean just to really truly just not have to concentrate, like the plots aren't too complex, the characters aren't too complex, like you can just have a good time, then I think you'd really enjoy Elsie Silver. But I think because of that, I think it's a bit too simple and a bit too fluffy for me, so I personally don't enjoy the Chestnut Spring series, and I do want to finish it because there are other tropes coming up. I think this one might be like sports romance or ice hockey or something. I'm not entirely, I can't remember, so I do want to keep going, but I do think you will either love Elsie Silver or you won't. I don't like Elsie Silver, but that could change. Like, I'm always open to like changing my opinions, especially like when it comes to authors. I know that this isn't my genre of choice, so if that's your kind of genre, then I actually would recommend Elsie Silver, but just don't expect amazing writing, because I do think that I personally don't think her writing is that amazing and it's nothing really to write home about. But however, the books themselves are just kind of a good escapism, because especially like the world of ranches and cowboys and small towns, I think that's quite far-fetched for quite a lot of us readers. Like, we don't live that kind of lifestyle, so it almost feels a little bit like fantasy, like, you know, your dream. It's like your dream as a child when you were younger and you want to grow up on a ranch with all these horses and things like that. That's kind of fun. I love that side of it. I don't really know if to say this is overhyped or underhyped really. I think Flawless is overhyped and I didn't like Flawless at all, but I actually did rate Heartless 4 stars. It's just not my favourite genre. So I would recommend it if you like your cute, fluffy romances. If you don't, and if you need a little bit more excitement, a little bit more dark and dangerous, like Elsie Silver is not going to be for you. Even if you like forbidden romances, because a lot of these tropes are like age gap and single dad and kind of leaning towards forbidden love. There's a lot better authors out there that write that trope than Elsie Silver. Okay, so the Dreamland Billionaire series. I do not like this series. I have actually read 2 out of the 3 books, but I'm not going to read the 3rd book because it's about 600 pages long, and I already know I didn't really love books 1 and 2. I think at the time of reading Terms and Conditions, I rated it 4 stars, but that was definitely a very generous rating, and it's definitely only a 3-star read for me, to be honest. The fine print is one of the most overrated books I've ever read, ever. Like every single page of this I was reading, I was like, how is this so popular? And I don't mean any disrespect to the author, but just genuinely, like, all the tropes in this are not done well, I don't think. And it is so insta-lust, it literally sickened me. And it was just because of that, it was so unrealistic. I do think the end of this book was so much better than the beginning of the book, but I just thought, like, for a billionaire romance, there are so many better billionaire romances out there, like the Crossfire series that I do review, Dark Prince Road series, so My Dark Romeo, My Dark Desire, like, they are such better billionaire romances than this. Even Megan Quinn's Kane Brothers series is miles better than this, in my opinion. I think that this is really extremely overhyped, and I actually don't think the writing is good in this. Billionaire romance, I personally think it's like, how can you get it wrong? Like, these men have unlimited amounts of money to do whatever they want to do. It's not difficult to write a good romance story where there isn't that many limits to what the characters can do to, like, grovel or chase somebody or to, like, build tension, like in a workplace and things. Like, all the foundations are there, and I just thought this was so bad. I've actually heard a lot of people say that they do think that this was quite overhyped, and I think if I read this now, so at the time when I read this, that was 2 years ago, I've read 200 books since then, I would probably have DNF'd this book, because that is how much I didn't enjoy Lauren Ash's writing. And I haven't read, because of that, her F1 series, because I just don't know if she's going to be for me. I know what I need in a book, so I don't think that this is a good recommendation from BookTok, but obviously that's just my opinion. I think there are much better billionaire romances that you can spend your time and money reading than this series. Paola's Trilogy by Lauren Roberts. This is like a romantasy, and it is YA, which is why it surprises me that I really, really enjoyed this. It is pretty much just a copy and paste, I would say. The Hunger Games, it's very, very similar, and you feel like you're reading basically the same storyline, but I cannot deny how fun this was. And bearing in mind, I think Paola's is quite long. Oh, it's like nearly 500 pages, and that's also what was putting me off, because I thought, do I want to read 500 pages of YA romance when I'm 29 years old? Because I struggle to connect with YA because I just feel like I'm so far away from the ages of the characters. But, I mean, I'm not that far away, but you know what I mean? Like, when I'm reading about characters that are like 18 years old and I'm 29 and they're crying about things, I just cannot connect to them most of the time. But in this was so fun. The tension was so good. This was one of those books, I read this only a year ago, and I remember thinking to myself, this is either going to be one of those BookTok books where everybody loves it and I read it and I'm underwhelmed by it, or I'm actually going to believe in the hype. And this is one of those books where the hype is so real. This series is so good, and I can't wait for the last book to come out. I think it's just so fun, and she does romantasy so well. Like, she ticks all the boxes for romantasy. I did see some people saying that they feel like her writing is very, like, she's telling too much and not showing enough, and I do think that is more true for Reckless. I think this book is very much filler, but Paola's, genuinely, like, if you haven't read this yet, honestly, please read it. You will not be able to put it down. It's so exciting, it's fast paced, it's such a page turner, and I'm really surprised at how much I love this. So yeah, this was a really good recommendation from BookTok. Feel so basic for saying this, but yes, anything Sarah J Maas writes I think is genuinely really good. I've read the whole of the ACOTAR series and I've read the Throne of Glass series, and they have both blown me away, and they are characters and stories that have stuck with me since I read them. I think for really easy, like, get yourself lost in a complete fantasy world with romance and magic and fae and all that stuff. Like, there is not an author that I've read that's better. I think Zodiac Academy, you can do that. This really is as good as everybody says. I love ACOTAR with my whole entire heart. And then Throne of Glass, which is a little bit different. ACOTAR is way more romance driven, and then Throne of Glass is very political, and the romance is quite subplot in that series. But that one is even more, I can't decide which one I prefer more, but I actually think Throne of Glass, the actual story as a whole, is a complete masterpiece, and I will never get over it, ever. I will never get over how I felt reading Kingdom of Ash. That whole entire week that I was reading Kingdom of Ash, because it was literally like 900 and something pages, was one of the best weeks of my life. Staying on the theme of fantasy, the Shepherd King series by Rachel Gillig. Wow. Wow, I would not have even known what One Dark Window was if it wasn't for BookTok. I don't even think at the time this was even in like Waterstones or The Works or any of these UK bookstores. This blew me away. It is one of the most unique magic systems I have read in any fantasy series, and it's like a gothic fantasy. I wouldn't say it's like overly dark, but it definitely has that ominous, like dark academia, gothic sort of feeling. It isn't dark academia, but you know that feeling that you get when you read those books. It definitely gives you that feeling. This was absolutely incredible, and I'm still thinking about this book to this day. I think I read it in October last year. Amazing. The way this author writes is absolutely incredible. Her prose in this is unmatched. Like, I was blown away. I haven't actually read anything else by her. I don't know what else is in Rachel Gellig's backlist. Everyone was giving this 5 stars, and I thought to myself, I actually put off reading it because so many times I've had that where everyone's rating something 5 stars and I read it and it's just not a 5-star read for me. And it's also not one of those fantasies that is really, really long. Like, this is 400 pages, and then the second book is about 400 pages, and that is it. It's just a duology. You've just got those two, so you don't have to commit yourself to these 700-800 page fantasy books. Amazing author. Like, I cannot wait to see more from what she releases because she was just incredible. Okay, now I know everybody loves this series. I don't actually know what this series is called, but the first book is Belladonna. I did not like this at all. I said nothing but 5-star reviews. Whilst I was reading it, I had to go on Goodreads because I was like, am I reading the same book as everybody else? I was definitely more in the 2-star category as opposed to 5 stars. I did not understand the hype with this at all. However, it is like a historical romance, but I was expecting so much more from this. I thought this was just so severely, like, I didn't understand. I just don't feel like I was reading the same book as everybody else, which is fine. We're not all going to like the same stuff, but personally I just didn't enjoy it. I thought it was quite bland. I didn't realise it was going to be historical romance, so maybe that's a little bit on me. MMC is death himself, like personified, if you will. How can you not enjoy that? But I just felt like the execution of it just wasn't good, so I'm not going to continue the series. I personally didn't enjoy this one, but I know a lot of other people did. This, I don't even have too much to say about the Ravenhood trilogy series. Like, masterpiece. I found this through BookTok. I probably wouldn't have really known about it if it wasn't for BookTok. One of my favourite series ever. Characters that I think about every day. Like, I just cannot, this is faultless for me. Didn't love the third book so much because that's the second chance romance between Cecilia and another character, and I think depending how much you enjoy that book depends how much you love who Cecilia ends up with, and I didn't like who she ended up with, so I didn't love that book. But this book and Exodus, some of the best books I've ever read, and Kate Stewart's writing is beautiful, absolutely beautiful, and I just think this is amazing. I need to reread this actually. It's time for a reread, I think. And then in the Twisted series, I didn't like books 1 and books 2, but I loved books 3 and 4. I actually think that this is one of the best enemies to lovers ever. It's funny, it's got so much banter in it, the backwards and forwards between Josh and Jules, and just the enemies to lovers in general. So good, so fun. And then Twisted Lies, obviously Christian Harper, one of the best morally grey characters ever. It's been like 3 years. I love him so much. This series was actually really fun. It's not the best written. Like, if you talk about, say, Kate Stewart's prose, this to me, like, is nowhere near as good as that. But then actually the characters and the plot and everything was just fun, and it was easy, so like it was enjoyable. Didn't like the first 2 books though, I have to say. Twisted Love is extremely overhyped, and then I think Twisted Games is just not my favourite tropes, because that's like princess bodyguard trope. I don't like that. I've not read many of them, and the ones that I have I don't really enjoy, but these 2 are actually really good. And then I think this, I'm not sure exactly what this series is called. I think it's called Dark Prince Road. So My Dark Romeo and My Dark Desire, incredible. Absolutely incredible. If you want some billionaire romance which is more adult but not leaning towards dark romance, this is the best series for you. The writing is so sharp and witty, and it's funny, like actually genuinely funny. They write the best characters, because these are LJ Shen and Parker S. Huntington, some of my favourite billionaire romances, and I feel like if my friends or people who don't often read would ask me like, oh, can you recommend me like a spicy romance book, I would recommend these, because I wouldn't scare them away with dark romance, but these would be a good read because they would be funny, they would still be well written. I never wanted these books to end. I do think all the 5-star reviews that these books get are so well deserved. That is my wrap up of some of BookTok's most popular books, whether I enjoy them, whether I think they're worth reading or worth picking up. I do tend to think with BookTok, it's not that the books are bad, it's just that they can be a bit underwhelming and just a bit like, oh, was that it? That's how they make me feel sometimes. Let me know in the comments if there's any books that you've read from these that you also enjoyed. Don't forget to subscribe so that you don't miss any of my upcoming content, and I'll see you in my next video.